Hi, everyone. Welcome to Divorce Source Radio, your audio source for information related to divorce. I'm Steve Peck. In today's show, we'll discuss the emotional side of divorce. Divorce can be a stressful and unsettling situation. A major relationship is ending. All sorts of your normal routines are upset, and along with the stress of transition are the legal hoops we have to jump through before things can be resolved. There are also volatile emotions that are frequently associated with divorce. Add all of this together, and you have a difficult situation to deal with. Consider the facts. The divorce rate in the United States is the highest in the world. 50% of all marriages end in divorce. 67% of all second marriages end in divorce. And divorce is associated with an increase in depression. People experience the loss of a partner, their hopes and dreams, and sometimes lifestyle. And the financial reality of divorce is also hard to comprehend. With the same financial resources, you now must support almost twice the expenses. There are really two sides to the divorce process: the emotional side and the legal side. In today's program, we'll explore the emotional side of divorce, as well as provide insight on how relationships go wrong and discover skills to prepare us for a new start. My guest today is Dr. Larry Friedberg, a clinical and forensic psychologist who's affiliated with the Psychological Institutes of Michigan. For over 25 years, Dr. Friedberg has specialized in psychotherapy for individuals, couples, and families, psychological evaluation and testing, clinical supervision, forensic psychology, family law evaluation, mediation, and parenting coordination. An extremely qualified and brilliant man. Here's my interview with Dr. Larry Friedberg. Dr. Friedberg, it's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, we mentioned in the intro that over 50% of new marriages end up in divorce, and that number rises to over 67% in second marriages. So I wondered,
yes,
what do you think the reason for this high level of divorce is today?
I think there's several different reasons. There's societal, there's in the sense that it's become more acceptable to get a divorce. When I was growing up, it certainly was unacceptable, and we looked at, or my parents and their generation looked at people who were divorced in a different way than we look at people today. Second, the increases in women's involvement in the workforce. Women have much more freedom today economically than they did 50 years ago, 40 years ago. Their incomes have come up. They're still not equal to men's, but they've come up substantially. And used to be, even if a woman was miserable in her marriage, it was very hard for her to initiate divorce proceedings because she could never afford to live on child support, and she couldn't support herself. And so many more women were homemakers. That's made a big difference. And I think there have been a lot of value changes. Again, there's not a stigma associated with divorce like there used to be, at least among most Americans. And the other thing I think is that increasingly we have a consumer-oriented culture where things are valued to the extent that they give us pleasure or satisfaction, as opposed to things being valued in their own right for moral or ethical reasons.
Yeah.
So in the past, staying in a marriage was more of a moral or an ethical question. It was the wrong thing to do to get a divorce. That's much less of a concern now.
Right.
A very big concern is, am I happy? And if I'm not happy, then I need to do something to change my situation. And some people even react to their marriages in a consumer satisfaction way. If I'm not happy, then I will, get something or someone who will make me happy. And all of those things have changed our whole approach to divorce.
So very societal.
Yes.
So let's talk about couples when they begin having trouble. What are the signs to look for if you're a couple, things aren't working well? What do we look for?
Well, I mean, a lot of the problems revolve down to 2 or 3 issues. One, the inability to communicate. There are couples out there that are just avoiding one another and they're not communicating with one another hardly at all. Mm-hmm. Or their communication is completely superficial and there's no intimacy in their speaking with one another. There's no sharing of feelings or ideas or what's going on with one another. So a breakdown in communication clearly is going to be there in a lot of these couples.
But where does that begin, and how do we identify that? Because obviously when you get involved in a relationship, you're in love and things are working well and you're having great communication.
Right.
So the sign is that when we stop communicating, when we notice a difference, that's a sign.
Yes.
And now what do we do when we notice that sign? Do we approach each other? Do we go to counseling, or do we try to approach each other first and then maybe go to counseling?
That's what I like. I like the approach one another first and then go to counseling. I mean, counseling isn't always necessary. Couples sometimes stop communicating for reasons that can be mended, that they can handle themselves. They don't need a third party. And they should try to communicate with one another better. Just to elaborate on your previous questions, another sign would have to do with conflict and the inability to resolve conflict. Mm-hmm. So let's say there's a disagreement between the couple and things either accelerate and get louder and louder and angrier and they don't get resolved. So conflict isn't constructive. I mean, people disagree, they get angry, they have feelings, they feel hurt, whatever. If they can talk about that and resolve the conflict, if they disagree, but they're able to come to decisions or come to, okay, this is what you need, I'm going to change my behavior, or let's try to meet each other somewhere midway, that's resolving conflict. Where too many conflicts are either leading to just these flare-ups, these blow-ups of anger, and then in between you have avoidance, where you have continuing unresolved conflict, or where nothing happens.
And so I'd imagine in some of those situations where you don't have conflict resolution and you get really angry, but then somehow you manage to move on, you still haven't resolved that conflict. And so that resides somewhere within you, does it not?
Yes. Well, often it's a two-way street. I mean, resolving conflict resides in the relationship. So it's unclear. You'd have to really look at, is it me? Am I being rigid? Am I being unsympathetic? Am I not considering the other person's point of view?
In your professional opinion, do you find that most people have the ability to truly evaluate themselves?
Some people have that ability. Most people have some difficulty doing that. I mean, it is hard to look in the mirror and to criticize oneself in a constructive way. You can look at yourself and say, I'm not good at that, or this is a failing of mine and I should feel bad about that. It's much more difficult to criticize yourself in a constructive way. That is, okay, there's something here that I need to change. What am I going to do about it? The same thing happens with couples. Something here is wrong. What are we going to do about it? Now, there are some couples who can work their way through issues, and that's a skill, and that's, to a very large extent, what marital counseling teaches you to do. That is, to talk, to express your feelings, to listen, and to attempt to respond to the other person's feelings by really listening to them, and to not get caught in being very defensive, okay, as in not looking at yourself, as in not listening, as in avoiding, as in ratcheting up into screaming matches, as in asserting power, etc.